Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar on using root cause analysis to inform school improvement planning. My name is Candice Bocala, and I am a Senior Research Associate with WestEd. Today's webinar is brought to you by REL Mid-Atlantic and the School Support and Improvement Research Alliance. REL Mid-Atlantic is one of 10 regional RELs funded by the Institute of Education Sciences. We serve Delaware, the District of Columbia, Maryland, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. The School Support and Improvement Research Alliance works to identify and understand effective interventions and practices to support school improvement and turnaround through the development and provision of training, coaching, and other technical support and applied research. For our webinar today, I am joined by several colleagues. We'll talk about who we are and introduce ourselves before we get started. First, let me introduce Tiara Booker-Dwyer.
Hi, I'm Tiara Booker-Dwyer. I am the Assistant Superintendent at the Maryland State Department of Education.
Thank you. And now let me introduce Dr. Segun Eubanks.
Hello, Dr. Segun Eubanks. I am the Director of the Center for Educational Innovation and Improvement at the University of Maryland, College Park.
Thank you. And we also have Lori Lynn Sutton.
Hello. Lori Lynn Sutton. I am the coordinator for school turnaround out of Baltimore City Public Schools.
Thank you. And we are also joined by my colleague, Amy Evans.
Hi, good morning. Hello, I am a Senior Research Associate and School Improvement Specialist at WestEd.
Thank you. So now that you've met our presenters, we're going to go on with the rest of our content, and I'm going to first turn it over to Tiara to set the stage for us.
Thank you, Candice. The Office of Leadership Development and School Improvement at the Maryland State Department of Education supports the professional growth of school and central office leaders. We also oversee the teacher and principal evaluation system, and we provide guidance to improve educational outcomes for students. Essential to improving educational outcomes is understanding the root causes for school performance problems. The Maryland State Department of Education partnered with the University of Maryland College Park School of Education to engage in the root cause analysis process with our lowest achieving schools. We intentionally partner with institutions of higher education in Maryland for all school improvement efforts. Working side by side with our university partners helps to improve the preparation and support of our current and future teachers and leaders. At this time, I would like to introduce our university partner from College Park, Dr. Segun Eubanks, who leads the Center for Educational Innovation and Improvement.
Thank you so much, Tiara. The Center for Educational Innovation and Improvement is a relatively new center that is part of the College of Education at the University of Maryland College Park. Our primary goal is to leverage the knowledge, skills, and research abilities of university faculty and other experts to work directly in partnership with schools and school systems to help solve tough problems of practice and problems related to educational equity and access across the state of Maryland. For this project, we were joined by colleagues and partners at Bowie State University and Morgan State University, and supported by the American Institutes for Research in developing and designing a process to help schools who are working on school improvement efforts to do a comprehensive and meaningful root cause analysis, which is what we will talk about as part of this webinar. And with that, I will turn it over to Amy to talk about next steps.
Hi, this is actually Candice. I'm just going to present to you the objectives and a little bit of the research base for the content today. So by the end of this webinar, you will understand how and why root cause analysis supports successful school improvement planning by bridging needs assessment and action planning. You'll also understand how to use root cause analysis in your own school improvement planning process. So why do we need to engage in a root cause analysis? According to the literature, this is a really important step. For example, we often respond to problems prematurely before fully exploring what might be contributing to the problem. And even though using educational data can help schools improve student outcomes, The data can tell you where the gaps and challenges are, but the data cannot tell you why those problems are occurring. Exploring the reasons why the problem is occurring is part of the most important step in understanding how to solve it. Additionally, root cause analysis is a systemic way of unpacking the reasons why a problem is occurring in order to determine a plan to address the causes and therefore address the problem. The steps in a root cause analysis include identifying a problem of practice, asking why that problem exists, prioritizing the causes of the problem in a way that points to logical next steps, and then you will end up prioritizing those causes to decide which way to go when resources are limited. It's important to emphasize here that root cause analysis is fundamentally a data-driven process. It always starts and ends with data. So according to other studies, how is root cause analysis helpful? Root cause analysis can be helpful for many reasons, which are all focused on collaborative problem solving. It encourages dialogue with those involved about why specific problems exist and how to address them. It allows participants to challenge their assumptions about these problems by talking with a little bit more detail about where the problems came from. It helps participants analyze their past strategies through a reflective process, which helps them determine what has worked in the past and what might not have worked. And it also builds collaboration and ownership among the group that is addressing the problem because they engage in dialogue and have a chance to talk to one another about what they think is going on. Additionally, the research has shown that using a structured inquiry process can be useful for school improvement. Although there are no studies that focus directly on root cause analysis alone, root cause analysis is part of a larger inquiry process. In one 5-year quasi-experimental study of 15 Title I elementary schools, teams that engaged in an inquiry-focused protocol, such as one that uses root cause analysis and action planning, demonstrated statistically significant and positive gains on student achievement versus the comparison schools. So I'm going to turn this over to Tiara to explain Maryland's root cause analysis process.
Great, thanks, Candace. All schools identified for comprehensive support and improvement are required to have a root cause analysis completed by an external party. Using Title I funds, the Maryland State Department of Education paid for each comprehensive support and improvement school to have a root cause analysis completed by the University of Maryland College Park. The root cause analysis process can be used by any school leader, not just those that have been identified for comprehensive support and improvement, but any school can use this process to identify the root causes for a problem of practice. The Maryland State Department of Education partnered with the University of Maryland College Park to develop a facilitator's guide. This guide provides the protocol to conduct a root cause analysis at the school level. This guide was used to facilitate the root cause analysis process in comprehensive support and improvement schools. Once again, any school leader can use this guide as a blueprint to uncover core performance problems. At this time, Segun will review the process that Maryland uses to facilitate the root cause analysis process.
Thank you again, Tiara. And what we'll do is go through the steps that are outlined in the guide that Tiara referred to that you can use for your process. The first thing we'll talk about is what we need to do a root cause effectively. There's no mistaking that doing a root cause is going to require time. We estimate at least 12 hours over multiple meetings, which does not include some of the research and data analysis that you'll probably be engaged in after you go through the root cause process. It also, very importantly, requires a broad group of stakeholders. One of the most powerful parts of the root cause is that it respects the knowledge, skills, and ability of those folks in school communities that are closest to the problems, what they know about the problem, what they've experienced about the problem, and what they can tell us about the problem. So it must involve stakeholders. It obviously must involve good school data about performance, culture, and engagement, because we must start with what we know exists in order to effectively identify the problem and dig into its root causes. Of course, it requires all kinds of materials and supporting materials and resources which can be found in the guide that will help to move this process forward, and some of the protocols that are part of this process. We strongly recommend that when you're involved in a root cause process that you use a facilitator, preferably someone outside of the direct school community, so that principals and other stakeholders can be fully engaged participants in the process of root cause. Stakeholders, we recommend that you have a broad cross-section of people who are involved in the school community, from teachers, bargaining unit members, parents, community members, business partners, higher education partners. This is what you see here, just a minimum list. Any and all folks who are part of your school community and who engage and interact with you on a regular basis should be part of this process. It is particularly important to validate the voices of school staff at all levels as well. So let's begin by going through the first couple of steps in the root cause process. I will start with crafting a problem statement and brainstorming causal factors, which are the first two steps in the process. Step one is about identifying a problem that is going to be based on data. What we believe is a very good problem statement is one that will, that if solved, can go a significant way toward helping to close academic achievement gaps and or to improve your student outcomes in very meaningful ways. So going through and discovering a significant problem or practice is important. There are three parts to that. One is to deeply review school data and results using a variety of data resources, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. We then want to categorize problems into themes. What does the data tell us about the themes that are identified in the data? And then we want to craft a problem statement that, again, is something that is both important and something that we can do something about as a school community. So first, what kind of data do you want to look at? We think first and foremost to look at a wide variety of data that you can get your hands on as a school, and schools do have access to a wide array of data, quarterly benchmark assessments. Obviously, what you get from your annual assessments, attendance and absence, what you know about the characteristics of your teacher workforce, and the other things that you see here on your screen are just the beginning of the types of data that you want to look at as part of the initial analysis. We definitely think you should start with looking at the Maryland report card data, and we would point out that there is a report card summary that's easily available on the link here, but within that summary, when you begin to dig into the data, there are all kinds of ways in which you can look at your performance of subgroups in your schools, of grade levels, etc. So you want to make sure you go deeper than just that two-page summary and look at what some of the other data in the report card is telling you. So let's talk about a little bit about some of the problem statement guidance that we want to go through. Again, the problem statement is going to be the starting point for going through the causal systems analysis and root cause analysis, so it's very important. What a good problem statement does is describe the gap between the current reality and our desired performance, where we want to go. And it captures the details that will be identified that will focus the root cause. We talk a lot about, it's grounded in school data we talk a lot about avoiding blame and solutionitis. That means what we want to do is be very careful in a root cause analysis that you don't start with a solution that many of the folks in the room may already be thinking about. And so the most important part of a real good problem is that you don't try to solve it right away. And you also don't blame the folks who are involved in the problem. A problem is not the fault of the teachers. A problem is not the fault of the students or the parents. The problem is what the system has created and what we can do to solve it. The other thing we want to do is ask a couple of core questions that a problem identifies. Who is most affected by the problem? What's the nature of the problem? What's the gap between what is expected, right? If we expect that we have a certain number of our students who want to achieve at a certain level in tests, what's actually occurring, so we want to look at those gaps. We want to look at where and when does this problem occur. Does it occur at certain times of year? Does it occur with certain subgroups of students? Does it occur at certain grade levels? Looking at where that problem occurs is a very important part of good problem statement guidance. I want to give just a couple of examples and kind of non-examples of what a problem statement looks like. Often we talk in broad categories about problems, and we want to get a lot more specific. So saying that our students aren't meeting expectations is not a very deep problem. But saying that students in grades 3, 4, and 5, of those students, 82% of them did not meet or exceed statewide scores in ELA in a statewide assessment brings us to another level. Same thing with saying, you know, our ELL students and our special education, our IEP students aren't doing well. We may know that, but that's not a good problem statement. One that says that we've reviewed multiple data sources, including grades and credits and test scores, and they indicate that a high percentage of students in ELL and special education in this grade span 9 through 12 are not meeting college and career-ready standards. So hopefully you see the difference between broad statements and very specific problems of practice, which will align well to us being able to do good root cause analysis. So once you've identified that problem and spent a good amount of time doing that, and again, the guide brings you through some very specific steps about how to do that, you'll move to step 2, which is brainstorming causal factors. What is really causing this problem? Too often in education, we talk about a problem and we skip right to 10 possible solutions. What root cause does is slow us down and dig deeply and say, what is really inside this problem and what's causing it? And we recommend 3 steps that are outlined in the guide to get deep about what is causing your problem. The first is to brainstorm individual factors contributing to the existence or recurrence of the problem statement, to organize all of these brainstormed factors into themes using something we call a fishbone diagram, which I will talk about shortly, and then create a clear statement about these causes for each of the themes on the fishbone diagram. So this is what a fishbone diagram looks like. Very clearly, you can see why we call it a fishbone. The head of the fish or fishbone diagram is where you want to put your problem statement. And then when you begin to brainstorm all of these causes and you organize them into themes, all of the brainstormed causes are the small lines of what you might call the small bones of the fishbone. And the big themes are what's on the head of each of the major bones of the fish. And so in order to show you that more clearly, we have an example for you here. So this school has identified that the achievement gap between ELL students and students with disabilities and non-ELL students and non-students with disabilities has doubled in the last 2 years. First, a note about a good problem statement. You see that it talks very specifically about what that gap is and where it happens and to whom it happens. So this group of folks has brainstormed all of the possible problems, and they've categorized them in these big themes of leadership, instruction, process, staff, and culture. So what we say about any good brainstormed process is you always want to look back and make sure that you're looking at who are the people involved in this process, what are the environmental factors involved in this process, what are the policies and practices that are involved in these factors, and what are kind of the other key elements of the system that are involved in causing this problem. So underneath each of these themes, you'll see they've summarized these what we would call causal factor statements. I'll just give the example of leadership. Under leadership, the step that preceded this, there are probably 10 or 15 smaller ideas underneath leadership that they've summarized in a causal factor statement. Leadership does not understand the needs of ELL students because they did not spend the time in the ELL classrooms or evaluate the ELL teachers. So we've built that up to a causal factor statement. So let's talk about how you go through that process. And again, a lot more detail in the facilitator's guide for that, but we'll just run through that quickly. There are three ways in which you really want to, three steps in analyzing the underlying causes and really identifying root causes. Clarify and prioritize a few causal factor statements to dig in more deeply. Use this 5 whys protocol, and then dig into using a decision tree. So in order to do that, I'm going to hand it back over to Amy, and she's going to walk through in more detail about these next steps.
Thank you, Segun. So as Segun mentioned, the purpose of step 3 is really to determine the underlying causes that address that problem statement. After you've gone through steps 1 and 2 and you've brainstormed and you've identified the themes of the causal factors in step 2 using the fishbone, the team can use a couple of protocols to determine why does this happen, what might be contributing to this cause. The 5 whys questioning protocol, which sounds really fancy, but is nothing more than asking the question, why does this happen, multiple times. So while this exercise is simple, it's really powerful in that it helps dig deeper and get more specific about why the challenge or problem statement is happening. The real benefit to the 5 whys is, as Segun mentioned, the group that you pull together to provide input. So here's where that stakeholder team will be incredibly important, because this is not just the principal's responsibility to come up with reasons why, but rather it's important to get ideas from different roles throughout the building, such as teachers, and maybe even teachers at different grade levels to your specific problem of practice. Maybe you want to invite teachers from grade levels before the problem of practice is occurring and even after the problem of practice is occurring to get a full spectrum of what might be going on. And when you continue to ask why with many perspectives sitting around the table, eventually the group will get to the core issue, the root cause of a problem of practice, rather than just the symptoms. This results in much more successful and targeted improvements, and because understanding the reasons why and having your team understand the reasons why a problem exists helps you address it more swiftly and more successfully. So let's walk through an example, starting with one of the causal factors from the fishbone. In the fishbone, one of our factors to our achievement gap doubling for English language learners was that ELL students do not receive standards-based material. That was one of the causal factors under the instruction theme. So the team would ask, why does this happen? So this team identified, well, the instructional materials that the ELL teachers are using are still based on old standards, not the college and career ready expectation standards. The team would then ask, why does this happen? Why are the instructional materials based on old standards? Well, because the ELL teachers have not been involved and on the curriculum revision committee. So the team can either stop there or continue on. And you might be asking and wondering, well, how will I know if I've made it to the root cause? The last thing for step 3 is a check, if you will, determining whether root causes are actually root causes or a contributing cause. And there are a couple of ways that you can do that and a couple of questions that the team can ask to determine whether you've identified the actual root cause or if it's a contributing cause and you need to keep going. So let's take the example of what we just went through. Because the ELL teachers have not been involved and on the curriculum revision committee, would the growing achievement gap, this is what we would ask as a team, would the growing achievement gap between ELL students and non-ELL students have occurred if the ELL teachers were on the curriculum revision committee? Will the gap between ELL students and non-ELL students continue to grow if ELL teachers are on the curriculum revision committee? Will putting ELL teachers on the curriculum revision committee lead to similar gaps in ELL versus non-ELL continue to occur? If you answer yes to any of these questions, yes, the gap will continue to grow even if we put ELL teachers on the committee, then you've identified a contributing cause and not necessarily the root cause. But if the answer to these questions is no, no, the gap would not continue, no, the gap would not occur, no, the gap would begin to correct itself if we put ELL teachers on that curriculum revision committee, then you've identified the root cause. So that's just a way for the team to check itself, because as you're going through this, especially the first time, it can be difficult to figure out if you've gotten really and truly to the root cause or whether some of these may be contributing causes. The last step in the root cause analysis process is around prioritizing root causes. In this step, the team continues working on the root causes until their ideas are specific enough to become actionable. Really, this step ends when the team has determined which cause or causes are the most important to address. So the purpose of step 4 is to really determine and prioritize which underlying causes are the primary root causes. This is especially helpful when resources are limited, which we work in schools, we know is almost always. But it's important in step 4 to lay out what criteria you'll use to prioritize which causes to address and which causes are in our control. But whether something is in our control or not should be a strict threshold, and that's why we put it at the very end. There's quite a lot more within our control as a school and a team, and so using this criteria of whether it's in our control or not prematurely may turn the team into excusing causes that really they can address. So really the suggestion is that the team push its thinking past the initial, oh, that's out of our control, and determine and prioritize causes first, and then use the whether things are in our control at the end. So some criteria that teams can use to help them whittle down and really prioritize and hone in on causes that are applicable to address is how important is the cause to addressing our problem. So one example might be, if we put EL teachers on the curriculum committee, will student outcomes be improved? How feasible is it to address this problem? Do the EL teachers' schedules allow their involvement on the curriculum committee? Maybe that's one of the reasons why they're not on the curriculum committee. If not, how difficult would it be to arrange the schedules so that they could be? Do the EL teachers know how to write curriculum or vet curriculum or align curriculum to standards-based? If not, then how can we train them? How are EL teachers not being on the curriculum committee aligned to our achievement gap problems? Well, since we started with an achievement gap problem in determining this cause, having EL teachers might be a prioritized causal root cause that you want to address in your plan. And because you did such a great job of convening a team with a wide variety of perspectives, they may not necessarily agree on which causes to address. When you're ready to select which causes, it might be a good exercise to have folks vote. Because the purpose of prioritizing is to pick a few causes to address. If we have too many, we may not be able to adequately address them. And as we know, it's better to really push hard and implement several things well than to try to do too many things and not do them well at all. And lastly, we get to making recommendations for improvement. And this is an area that Segun and Candace provided some caution. When we're making recommendations, it's really just that, brainstorming possible changes, solutions, strategies, programs. The key is to stay focused on addressing the cause. And what I'll bring up in terms of solutionitis, as Segun discussed, is it might be really tempting when you get to this to want to jump here first. You want to skip steps 1 through 4 and get here as fast as possible. As educators, we think, we've identified a problem, we need to solve it, here are some solutions, I have them at the ready. If you get anything out of this webinar, it's have faith in the root cause analysis process in your team. The one scenario in going through this is you may end up recommending solutions you had in mind all along. That would be fantastic. We promise even if that happens, the root cause analysis process was not a waste of time because everyone sitting around the table will buy into the solution decided, which means less work for you in trying to sell it and get folks on board. And they will likely champion the solutions throughout the school too, making, yet again, less work for you as a leader. But there may be a chance that you find reasons for your problem of practice that were so far from why you thought. Each of these instances is a win. But if you jump to this step about solutions, while you think you might be doing your kids a service because you're addressing the problem immediately, you're really just shooting in the dark. If you just go through the motions of the root cause analysis and recommend solutions not based on what you uncover, but really what you wanted to do anyway, in the end, you might be doing your kids a disservice too. So either of those is a lose. Please trust the process. You won't regret it. But don't take our word for it. I'd like now to introduce Lori Lynn, who will talk to you about how this process was conducted in schools in Baltimore City. What was helpful, what was challenging, what were some of the lessons learned? Lori Lynn?
So as the coordinator for school turnaround out of the Chief Academic Office for Baltimore City Schools, my role is really to lead the strategy work for our comprehensive support and improvement schools. Part of the work this year included leading from the district the root cause analysis process. Over several months, 31 of our schools engaged in this process with their school teams and stakeholder groups. As Segun referenced earlier, this process included 2 very valuable activities, the fishbone activity and the 5 whys activity, that allowed our school teams to really dig into their data and have transparent conversations with all voices around the table about that data. Having the facilitators from the University of Maryland of College Park really helped lead the process and allowed our schools and school teams to step back and fully engage in the conversation over the course of the 2 days. I would say one of the biggest lessons learned was around that ongoing communication and the time that it took to really engage in the process. So throughout the process, what we found pretty quickly was that we had to communicate regularly with all stakeholders so that they remained engaged and they had a full understanding of the process. That from my office included weekly updates to school leaders as well as collaborating with our partners from the University of Maryland and the Maryland State Department of Education. We also found that the time was definitely something that we weren't expecting for scheduling 32 visits with school leaders and external facilitators. Again, that was where the communication really was key to ensure that over the few months that everyone remained engaged and very excited about the process. I would say if we were to do this on our own, I'm not sure that we would really do many things different, except that we would definitely need to increase training and understanding across the offices. Having facilitators lead the process and experiencing that with that partnership from the University of Maryland College Park was really important because it allowed for the fidelity of the process and for those outcomes to not really be biased, but instead be based on the conversations and the data and being data-driven. With that being said, the facilitators had to be knowledgeable around school improvement, and they also must go into the process with a clear understanding of the school's data and content. Of course, going through this process, our hope is that the recommendations support school improvement and improve our student outcomes. Our hope is that the schools come out of this process with a clearer vision for the work. And finally, we hope that schools continue to engage in this process as part of a continuous cycle of improvement with their stakeholder groups. I would now like to turn it back over to Tiara so she can add some final thoughts. Thank you, Lori Lynn. The Maryland State Department of Education grounds school improvement work in the 4 domains of rapid school improvement. The 4 domains include turnaround leadership, talent development, instructional transformation, and culture shift. After the root cause analysis is completed, school leaders align interventions to address root causes to the 4 domains of rapid school improvement. The Maryland State Department of Education provides professional learning experiences on how to implement the 4 domains of rapid school improvement and how to develop and implement intervention plans. The Office of Leadership Development and School Improvement has partnered with WestEd and the Regional Educational Laboratories to develop resources that support effective school improvement. Please visit themarylandresourcehub.com to access school improvement resources.